Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt smaller? Like everyone else belongs there and you're just pretending to fit in? That crushing weight in your chest when someone seems more confident, more successful, more naturally gifted than you'll ever be. You're not broken, you're not defective, and you're definitely not alone. What you're experiencing is what Friedrich Nietzsche called the fundamental human condition, the gap between who you are and who you could become. But here's what most people never understand about Nietzsche's philosophy. He didn't see this feeling of inadequacy as a problem to be solved. He saw it as the raw material of greatness. Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he wasn't talking about surviving trauma. He was talking about something far more radical, the deliberate transformation of your deepest insecurities into the foundation of unshakable inner power. Today, in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you Nietzsche's most revolutionary insight. The feeling of inferiority isn't your enemy. It's your greatest teacher. And the people who seem naturally confident, naturally superior, they're not born different. They've simply learned to use this universal human experience in a way that most people never discover. You see, Nietzsche understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. The human psyche doesn't seek comfort. It seeks growth. It doesn't want to feel safe. It wants to feel powerful. And the path to true power doesn't come from avoiding the feeling of inferiority. It comes from learning to dance with it, to transform it, to use it as fuel for becoming someone you never imagined you could be. What I'm about to show you isn't positive thinking or motivational fluff. This is a complete restructuring of how you understand yourself, your potential, and your relationship to everyone around you. Nietzsche called this process becoming who you are, not who society wants you to be, not who your family expects you to be, but who you actually are beneath all the layers of conditioning and self-doubt. If you're ready to discover why your feelings of inadequacy might be the greatest gift you've ever been given, and how to transform them into a source of unbreakable confidence, make sure to subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into the philosophical insights that can completely change how you see yourself and move through the world. By the time we're finished, you won't just feel differently about your insecurities. You'll understand why Nietzsche believed that the people who feel inferior are actually the ones with the greatest potential for extraordinary transformation. The problem isn't that you feel inferior. The problem is that no one has ever taught you what to do with that feeling. First principle. Nietzsche's concept of the Ubermensch starts with embracing what he called the courage to be disliked. Most people feel inferior because they're constantly measuring themselves against other people's standards, other people's achievements, other people's approval. But Nietzsche realized that this external validation game is rigged from the start. You will always find someone smarter, more successful, more attractive, more talented than you in any category you choose to focus on. This isn't a personal failing, it's a mathematical certainty. But here's what Nietzsche understood that changes everything. The moment you stop playing that comparison game, you enter an entirely different realm of human experience. The Ubermensch doesn't mean superhuman in the comic book sense. It means someone who has transcended the need for external validation by creating their own value system, their own definition of success, their own standards of worth. They've become what Nietzsche called a law unto themselves. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or arrogant. It means something far more profound. It means recognizing that your feelings of inferiority are actually pointing you toward your unique path of development. The things that make you feel inadequate are often the exact areas where you have the most potential for growth. Think about it this way. You don't feel inferior about things that don't matter to you. You feel inferior about things that represent what you deeply want to become. That crushing feeling when you see someone who seems more confident. That's your soul showing you what confidence looks like and demanding that you develop it yourself. Nietzsche would tell you to stop trying to become like other people and start asking a different question. What would it look like to become fully, authentically yourself? Not a better version of someone else, but the first and only version of who you actually are. This requires what he called the courage to be disliked, because when you stop trying to meet everyone else's expectations, some people won't understand. Some people won't approve. Some people will be threatened by your refusal to play their validation games. And that's exactly how you know you're on the right path. The person who needs everyone to like them will always feel inferior because they're trying to be everything to everyone, which means being nothing to themselves. But the person who has the courage to be authentically themselves, regardless of others' opinions, has stepped into what Nietzsche called self-overcoming. Second principle, transform your resentment into what Nietzsche called creative force. This might be the most counterintuitive insight in all of philosophy. Most self-help tells you to let go of negative emotions, to release resentment, to forgive and move on. Nietzsche said something completely different. He said that resentment, properly understood and channeled, is one of the most powerful creative forces in human experience. The key is learning to use it as fuel, rather than letting it use you as a victim. When you feel inferior to someone, there's usually a story underneath that feeling. They have advantages I don't have. They're naturally gifted in ways I'm not. Life is easier for them. They don't understand real struggle. This is what Nietzsche called slave morality, the tendency to explain away other people's success rather than learning from it. But here's the transformation. Instead of using that resentment to justify why you can't succeed, use it to identify exactly what you want to develop in yourself. That person who seems effortlessly confident, study them. What specifically do they do that creates that impression? How do they carry themselves? How do they speak? How do they handle challenges? Your resentment is actually a roadmap to your own potential greatness. It's showing you exactly what qualities you admire and want to cultivate. But instead of wallowing in the gap between where you are and where they are, use that gap as motivation to begin your own development. Nietzsche called this the will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. Power to become who you're capable of becoming. Your feelings of inferiority aren't evidence that you're weak. They're evidence that you have standards, that you can recognize excellence, that you're capable of wanting something greater for yourself. The person who never feels inferior is either delusional or has stopped growing. The person who feels inferior and uses that feeling as motivation to develop themselves is on the path to what Nietzsche called self-creation. Turn your envy into curiosity. Turn your resentment into research. Turn your feelings of inadequacy into a personalized curriculum for your own transformation. This is how you transform the very emotions that make you feel small into the driving force that makes you great. Third principle. Embrace what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, including the fate that made you feel inferior in the first place. This is perhaps the most radical shift in perspective you can make. Instead of wishing you were different, instead of resenting your circumstances, instead of believing that your struggles are evidence that life is unfair, what if you could learn to be grateful for exactly the experiences that created your feelings of inadequacy? Nietzsche believed that everything that happens to you, including the painful experiences, the rejections, the failures, the moments when you felt completely outclassed by other people, all of this is raw material for becoming extraordinary. But only if you learn to see it that way. The person who grew up with natural advantages, who never had to struggle, who never felt inferior, often lacks the hunger that drives real achievement. They don't have the deep motivation that comes from knowing what it feels like to be underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. Your feelings of inferiority have given you something that naturally confident people often lack: the ability to empathize with struggle, the motivation to prove yourself, the hunger to become more than what circumstances seem to dictate for your life. Nietzsche would tell you that your difficult experiences haven't damaged you. They've equipped you. They've given you a depth of character, a resilience, and a motivation that people who never struggled often never develop. But here's the key. You have to consciously choose to see your experiences this way. You have to actively transform your narrative from "why did this happen to me?" to "how did this prepare me for what I'm meant to become?" This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending that painful experiences weren't actually painful. It's about recognizing that the very experiences that made you feel small might be exactly what's needed to help you become large. The struggles that made you feel weak might be what's building the strength you'll need for what comes next. Amor fati means loving your fate so completely that you wouldn't change anything about your past, even the parts that hurt, because you understand that everything has contributed to making you who you are. And who you are, properly developed, has the potential for greatness that people who never struggled might never achieve. Fourth principle: develop what Nietzsche called master morality by creating your own definitions of success and value. Most feelings of inferiority come from accepting other people's definitions of what makes someone valuable, successful, or worthy of respect. But Nietzsche realized that this is a choice, and it's a choice that keeps you trapped in perpetual inadequacy. Master morality doesn't mean dominating other people. It means taking responsibility for defining what excellence looks like in your own life. Instead of measuring yourself against external standards that may have nothing to do with your actual path or purpose, you begin to measure yourself against your own potential. This requires something most people never do: getting clear about what you actually value, not what you think you should value, not what other people value, but what genuinely matters to you when you strip away all the conditioning and expectations. Maybe you've been feeling inferior because you're not as wealthy as others, but wealth isn't actually what you value most deeply. Maybe you've been feeling inadequate because you're not as socially connected as others, but solitude and deep work might actually be where you thrive. Maybe you've been measuring yourself against people who are playing a completely different game than the one you're meant to play. Nietzsche would ask you, what would it look like to become excellent according to your own standards? What would it mean to win at the game you're actually supposed to be playing instead of losing at games that don't matter to your real development? This doesn't mean lowering your standards or making excuses for mediocrity. It means raising your standards in the areas that actually matter for your unique path, while releasing yourself from the need to compete in areas that aren't aligned with who you're becoming. The person with master morality doesn't feel inferior because they're not trying to be like anyone else. They're trying to become the fullest expression of their own potential. They're competing with who they were yesterday, not with who someone else is today. This shift from external comparison to internal development is what transforms feelings of inferiority into feelings of excitement about your own growth. You stop asking, "Why am I not like them?" and start asking, "What would it look like to fully become myself?" Fifth principle: practice what Nietzsche called eternal recurrence, living as if you would be willing to repeat every moment of your life, including the moments when you felt most inferior, infinite times. This is the ultimate test of whether you're truly embracing your path or still wishing you were on someone else's. If the thought of repeating your exact life, with all its struggles, failures, and moments of inadequacy, fills you with horror, then you're still living according to other people's. You're still believing that your experiences should have been different, that you should have been born with different advantages, that your path should have been easier. But if you can honestly say that you would choose your exact life again, with all its difficulties, because those difficulties have been essential to becoming who you are, then you've achieved what Nietzsche considered the highest form of human development. This doesn't happen overnight, it's a practice. Every time you catch yourself wishing you were different, ask yourself, what if this exact experience, this exact feeling of inadequacy, this exact challenge, is precisely what I need to become, who I'm meant to be? The person who has truly embraced eternal recurrence doesn't feel inferior because they understand that their entire life, including the parts that seemed like disadvantages, has been perfectly designed to create their unique form of strength, wisdom, and capability. Your feelings of inferiority aren't evidence that something is wrong with you. They're evidence that you're capable of recognizing excellence and that you have the sensitivity to want something greater for yourself. The question isn't how to stop feeling inferior. The question is how to use those feelings as fuel for extraordinary self-development. And here's Nietzsche's most profound insight about human potential. The people who seem naturally superior, naturally confident, naturally gifted, are often not as developed as they appear. They might have natural advantages, but they haven't had to develop the depth, resilience, and inner strength that comes from overcoming real challenges. You, on the other hand, have been forged by difficulty. You've been shaped by struggle. You've been deepened by experiences that people with natural advantages never had to face. This hasn't damaged you. It's prepared you for a level of achievement and fulfillment that people who never felt inferior might never reach. Nietzsche believed that the highest human development comes not from avoiding challenge, but from learning to love challenge. Not from avoiding the feeling of inferiority, but from transforming that feeling into the driving force of self-creation. The person who has never felt inferior has never had the opportunity to discover what they're truly capable of becoming. They've never had to dig deep, to find resources they didn't know they had, to push beyond what seemed possible for their circumstances. But you have had that opportunity. Every time you felt inferior, every time you felt inadequate, every time you felt like you didn't measure up, you were being invited into a deeper level of self-development. Most people reject this invitation because it's uncomfortable, but Nietzsche would tell you that comfort is the enemy of greatness. Your willingness to feel inferior, to sit with that discomfort, to use it as motivation rather than letting it defeat you, this is what separates people who achieve extraordinary things from people who settle for ordinary lives. The feeling of inferiority isn't a bug in your psychological system. It's a feature. It's your inner wisdom telling you that you're capable of more, that you have untapped potential, that you're ready for the next level of your own development. 20 minutes ago, you might have seen your feelings of inadequacy as evidence of your limitations. Now you can begin to see them as evidence of your potential. Not potential to become like someone else, but potential to become fully, authentically, powerfully yourself. This is what Nietzsche called becoming who you are. Not who you think you should be, not who others expect you to be, but who you actually are when you strip away all the external validation seeking and internal self-criticism. The person you're meant to become is not someone who never feels inferior. It's someone who has learned to transform every feeling of inferiority into fuel for extraordinary self-creation. Someone who has learned to love their fate so completely that they wouldn't change anything about their journey, because they understand that everything has been necessary for their unique form of greatness. You don't need to feel superior to other people. You need to feel excited about your own potential. You don't need to compete with anyone else's achievements. You need to become fascinated with what you're capable of creating with your own life. This is the Nietzschean path to unshakable confidence. Not confidence that comes from external validation, but confidence that comes from knowing that you are on your own path, developing your own potential, becoming your own unique version of human excellence. The next time you feel inferior to someone, remember this moment. Remember that feeling is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's showing you what's possible. It's inviting you to grow. It's pointing you toward the next level of who you're becoming. And that next level is not a better version of someone else. It's the fullest, most authentic, most powerful version of you.